Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to see everyone here today. I know I was explaining to the team that in Barbados, when the rain begins to fall, unfortunately, most people might be heading for home instead of attending the event. But it's good to see so many faces here, and it's truly a wonderful opportunity, and it's really an important gathering to discuss the research findings and to share and to talk about domestic violence and its impact on Barbados and the wider Caribbean. Okay, so I want to begin first by thanking some of our major stakeholders, which is where Adele left off, one of her final slides, and to extend some thanks to the stakeholders, because a project of this magnitude, the success of a project of this magnitude depends on a number of persons and organizations. I'd first like to say a very big thank you to Ambassador Barford and the delegation of the EU to Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean. Thank you. Professor Adele Jones and the team at the University of Huddersfield, who were on call 24/7 and were always willing to answer any and every query related to the project. Also, specifically for Grenada, members of the board of directors at the Sweetwater Foundation, the advisory team to the None in Three project in Grenada, and a special thanks to the Ministries of Social Development and Education and Health, and special thanks to the NGO Grand Chat. In Barbados, we want to also thank the advisory team to the None in Three project. Special thanks to the Ministries of Health, Social Care, Constituency Empowerment and Community Development, Education, Science, Technology, Innovation, the Government Industrial School, Barbados Council for the Disabled, Barnard, Marian House, HIV/AIDS Commission, the Barbados Family Planning Association. Actually, in attendance, I see Udali Wickham from Barnard and Roseanne Foster Vaughan, who I owe a great debt of gratitude in terms of accessibility for some of the participants for the study. So I just wanted to say a big thank you to those who are in attendance. And last, and most importantly, to all the women in Barbados and Grenada who shared their stories with us. So my presentation is brief, it's short, and to me it's very sweet. Because I just wanted to share with you some reflections from me during the process. And I want to say, first of all, thank you to Adele and to Ina for allowing me to be part of this project. It has been a life-changing experience for me. I had the opportunity to interact with 21 women in Barbados, conducting interviews from the various groups which were identified earlier. And it was a tremendous experience, and it provided me with a lot of food for thought. And actually, I'm looking forward to the end product, to see what happens after we share the findings and we talk about it and we've internalized the findings from the research project, from the project. What is the next step for Barbados and Grenada and for the rest of the Caribbean? So I just want to say a big thank you to all of those women who shared their life experiences, their stories. Women who are still traumatized with memories of violence in their lives, women who were willing to share. And one of the things that came over for me during those interviews was this need to share to help others who were in similar circumstances. How will my story be used to make it better, to improve the lives of those persons who are also experiencing issues of domestic violence? How will my story benefit and make a tangible impact on the lives of these women and their children? So I just want to say a big thank you for them for the willingness to share their experiences and to see that these experiences can then benefit other persons. And another thing that stood out for me was the vibrancy with which these stories were told. And in some instances, these women were recounting stories that happened 4, 5, 6 years ago, and they were talking about them as though they happened yesterday. It was so emotional, and in many instances, it would just break into tears when they recounted the stories and the experiences and how it impacted on their children. So these are some of my reflections, some of the things that stood out for me, my highlights. this whole notion of intergenerational cycles of abuse and poverty, many of these survivors were able to tell you stories from their mothers and from their grandmothers. They all experienced, most of them would have experienced issues of domestic violence, and in some cases, and in too many cases, some of these women were survivors of child sexual abuse. Doors had been opened when they were younger, when they were children. They'd been abused by family members, by fathers, by neighbors, and one of the things that stood out for me was that a lot of them were just angry that there was never any justice, right? The perpetrators had been identified, but nothing had been done, and they felt as though they were shortchanged. I remember there was a story where one of the participants said that her sister's boyfriend had raped and buggered her when she was 10 years old. And when she reported it, her mother took a payment of $4,000 from the perpetrator's family. And she's now in her 30s, late 30s, and she's looking at me crying and saying, but justice, I never got any justice. I told them what happened, and instead of my mom helping me, she took a payment of $4,000. And I'm here today, I'm living still with the scars that I experienced during that. So that was one of the things that stood out for me. And then the two groups that we're looking at today, we're focusing on women with disabilities and pregnant women. For women with disabilities, the resiliency of this group was just phenomenal in terms of their responses to domestic violence, because they stood out as being, their spirits were indomitable spirits, you know, that they're true survivors. And for pregnant women, the fact that they were pregnant during the abuse means that they were carrying these lives within them growing, and they were, you know, one woman said, I'm usually a fighter. I would never allow anyone to hit me, but because I was carrying my child, I decided to let him have his way. I endured it because, you know what, the survival of my child, this growing life inside of me, was more important than me fighting back. And that's one quote that stood out with me. Also then, we talked about things like societal norms. With this one quote, yeah, I wanted to leave, but then there were older people telling me, you gotta cut your nose to spoil your features. Where this one survivor, she was in a relationship and she had two young girls, and when she was seeking advice from the older women in her community, she was told, you know, but you're not working, he's the breadwinner in the family. If you leave, what's going to happen to your children? Then they're going to be starving. So in a case like that, you got to cut your nose to spoil your features. And she said to me, but I don't see why I had to cut my nose. I love how I look. Why would I spoil my features just to, and you know, eventually she left the situation. So then we also looked at things like supportive and non-supportive environments. And one thing that stood out, which was of great importance to me and resonated with me, was that most of these women said that their belief systems took them through, caused them to be survivors, that they relied on God, supernatural forces to assist and to make them feel better, to empower them in terms of surviving domestic violence. And which leads me then to my pet, which is a pet peeve for me, an area which I think should be a greater focus should be and which is the role of faith-based organizations in responding to domestic violence. And I think because so many of these women highlight relationships with God, and they said, coming out to the recommendations, that they felt that the church should become more involved in responding to domestic violence. So that's something that I will hope to see coming out from this research project, is that civil society organizations, especially the church, especially faith-based organizations, that we respond in a more timely manner and you know, see what could be done additionally to what you're already doing to improve the lives of these women, and also to respond to domestic violence. And I think that's where I'm going to end. Thank you very much. And I want to say, once again, it's been a tremendous experience for me, and thank you very much for hearing what I have to say today. Thank you.